everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make an earring from these little extra bits that we have. I posted these up in the group, so I thought I would show you all how to use these sort of little multi-hole spacers. And I'm going to be making the other one of these earrings. So these are really good because they're actually like rigid, they aren't tassely, and they tend to sort of sit nicer. They come out quite elegant too. So we're going to be using amazonite beads, the multi-hole spacers, and then hematite beads at the bottom. So to start off with, you need all of this. So I've got crimps, I've got the multi-hole spacers, I have one earring hook, so I'm making the other one, a jump ring, and then the silver spacer beads, tiger tail, and then the other crystal beads that I'm using. So what you want to do is cut a variety of lengths of tiger tail. I always like to go longer just in case anything messes up, you know. It's always easier to cut a little bit off than it is to try and redo it. So I am going to do 4 pieces, obviously, for 4 strings. And one more. Unfortunately, tiger tail does go a bit feral and kind of zooms off of the spool, so just be careful of that. So 4 equally sized pieces. What I'm going to do now is get 1 crimp. So these little guys that you squash flat in order to trap the tiger tail, and put that onto the wire, and then grab your jump ring, pop the wire through the jump ring, fold it over, and then pop the tiger tail on there. So you've got a loop, the jump ring on there, and the tiger tail. Now, I like to just hold it in my nail and then pull the long cord, and that reduces down the loop size of the loop. Just make sure that when you've got your nail on it, you've got it on the point where it doubles over. Then grab some flat nose pliers, pulling it a little bit more tight than that, and just squish the crimp. So that makes it nice and secure, and you've got your first strand. Do the same again with each of the other strands. So you're just putting it onto the loop, doubling it over, tighten it, and squish. Try and get all of the loops the same size. It's a little bit hard to do unless you're kind of experienced at it, but when you're tightening it up in that same way, it does tend to be quite uniform. We want a fair bit of uniformity just because it will make a difference to how the final piece looks, whether it starts to look lopsided or not. That's a dud crimp. Sometimes crimps have like little pieces of metal in them. Just throw them out. They're cheap enough. You can't save a crimp that's got a piece of metal shoved in it. And the last one. So now you have 4 strands hanging off a single jump ring, and this is going to make the basis of your earring. So what you're going to want to do is trying to keep them in order. Now, depending on how you want your pattern to go is depending on how you do these next steps, but I always like to start off with a bead up the top to help space it out before you add the first spacer. Otherwise it can look a bit squashed and funny looking. So grab whichever strand you want to start off on. It doesn't really matter because they all come out in the end. So you just have to make sure they're all in order. So pop your first bead on. Next up I popped a spacer on. So to make sure obviously that you're going in the end hole because this is going to be one of the end ones. I did another silver bead. And then for this, I've got another amazonite bead, silver bead, spacer. So this is how you start working out the pattern of it. I mostly came to this last night because these amazonite beads were the only ones that really fit nicely between the spaces. I am going to do another one later on and show you how to use it with garnet, but not this time. So these are just a simple metal bead. That's all they are really. There's nothing much more to it than that. They're quite cheap and fairly easy to find. So we have 3 there, and so this will be our last metal bead and our last spacer before the end, because we're going to have 3 tiers but 4 spacers. So finish off, put that last one on there, and then I've got another one of these metal beads, and then adding these hematite beads. I just really liked how they looked at the end, so I thought they'd be really cute. Then I just use a single crimp to stop it off, so pop a crimp onto it, and you'll have something that looks like that. Now, what you then do, once again, grab your flat nose pliers and just squish the end of it so that it's all stuck on as nice and durable. Then just make sure that you're grabbing the next wire along. You don't want to cross over the wires, otherwise it will look a bit strange. And do exactly the same again. So what you're doing now, it starts to get a bit fiddlier. So the same as before, pop your metal bead on or whatever you're choosing to use, and then pop it through the next hole in the spacer. And continue your pattern. So you'll start to see it really come together after a while, and it starts to really sort of fall into place, but it is quite tricky to get them through those spacer holes and to get it to line up nicely. You don't want to force tiger tail, because otherwise it does tend to get kinks in it and it goes a bit wonky and crazy. So when you're putting it through, just try and sort of gently push it around rather than pulling it and ending up with a kink in the tiger tail. The same as if you're ever doing a bracelet or anything like that, sometimes they do get stuck. Don't force them, because you'll end up with a wonky bracelet. So these amazonite beads are ones that I actually stock, and I can get more at some point if anybody is wanting to make a pair of earrings that are just like this. I will be doing a series of these sorts of things, so hopefully we'll get you all some like good projects to go, and you can start to learn how we make some of the things that we work with, some of the things that we sell. So once again, finishing off this one, grabbing another silver bead, another hematite, and then another crimp. What you want to do is you don't want to do it super tight up against it. You want to have a little bit of movement in between them, so it just moves a bit more naturally. So normally with any other bracelets or anything like that, I would say pull it really tight, as far tight as you can go, and then do it. This one you want to have a little bit of flexibility. So just make sure it's got a little bit out. That's the second one. Then, as before, make sure you're doing the next low. Careful, because it does cross over, so sometimes it can start to look a bit funny. So it's that guy. And again, going through the top of the spaces, And you can really see it start to line up now. Don't worry too much about those top loops. They'll start to sort themselves out more as we go. Just make sure that they're not sort of caught up all over the place like this when you put the final crimp on. Otherwise, we have something that's a wee bit longer and you'll have to cut it off and redo it. So on a crystal level, energetically speaking, amazonite and hematite are actually really good together, even though they make kind of unlikely companions. This is Chinese amazonite, so it's actually a fairly light green, and it's got much more uniform appearance than the Russian amazonite, which makes it quite interesting. So amazonite's one of the stones of especially like strong women, named after Amazon women and all of that sort of thing. Well, obviously sharing the same name as Amazon women. But it's also a really good stone that is said to be good for like cooling down a really aggressive temper, or when you really, you know, have a very, very short temper, it helps you to have a bit of a longer fuse. And so it goes really well with hematite from that angle, because hematite is also very grounding and calming and very stable. I mean, obviously it's mostly iron ore. So it's very much a Mars stone as well, which makes it interesting to go with like a stone of the Amazon women, having a very, very masculine stone with something very feminine. So, I mean, make of that what you will. I quite like things that accidentally end up in balance, as this did. I didn't actually intend to go out there and make something that was balanced, especially from a masculine and feminine angle, but it just ended up that way. So same again, make sure you're just leaving a little bit of space for it to sit nicely, and then you're ready for the final one. Alright, now we'll do the last one. So same again, put on your whichever bead you've used for the top of it, thread it on through. Try and wrangle it in place. They do get harder to do as you go further forward for some reason. I don't know, probably something to do with physics there, but I can't help that. And into the final one. Next. That's why I like to say, you know, make sure you've got extra tiger tail, because it actually gives you a lot of space to work with as well. It's quite hard to do if you're trying to do it with a very, very short piece. So for anybody who was like, I'm not listening and I'm doing a short piece, you're probably learning now. And then through the last one. Now, because my hematite beads are a bit bigger, they take a little bit of wrangling to all get to sit next to each other. That's okay. You still need my little spacer, and then my hematite bead. That gives it a little bit more space to actually move around each other as well. So having that little spacer bead means that they're a bit further out from being squished right up against each other. And then one more crimp. And then you just squish it off like all the others. So don't worry if it all looks a bit manky like that. It does settle down eventually. You can actually sort of squash them into place. They do go back together eventually. So if yours is looking a bit strange, don't worry about it. Now we need to use our side cutters. These could be any standard plier side cutters. I've got little jewellery ones, but you can get almost any of them. Tiger tail's not that hard to cut because it's quite thin, so any of them will really do. So just cut it right up next to where the crimp is. You'll be fine. Check all your crimps, just make sure that they're really nice and tight. And then you have the basic earring there. You might want to need to straighten little bits and pieces up and things like that, not such a big deal. So now I've got my silver hooks. And what you want to do, when I was starting out, I always used my needle nose pliers and opened it out that way, thinking that that was the right way to do it. What you actually need to do, and it's actually far easier and better to do, is you grab it side on and you just twist it out a little bit. Pop on whatever you're popping on and then twist it back. Don't open it out because it actually weakens it. I broke many hooks that way. So there. It will take the wire a little bit of time to get settled into place. Don't stress too much about that. I mean, I made this one last night and left it overnight to sort of get into place. But there is 2 pairs of earrings. So these are kind of like a nice sort of chandelier style as well, so they end up being quite long. But you can do anything with these. You can do any number of crystals that you want. The biggest important thing is to do the size and getting the right size in between the holes in the spacer beads. But that's the biggest thing that you've really got to pay attention to. So that is my earring tutorial on how to use the multi-hole spacers. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back with a bracelet tutorial soon, and then we'll see. If you've got any suggestions, anything you want me to do, anything you want me to show you guys, let me know and I will. Alright? Thank you very much. Bye!